Okay, great. Well, this is the third meeting of the Unbridled Accountability and Support Program, and we are going to be talking about week 2 in the class, and then getting a little preview into week 3. So right now I have Shannon, Carol, Shayla, and Mary with me, and hopefully Colleen will be joining us soon. And if not, she can watch the recording back. But I would love to start out just with a little bit of reflection on, the different components from this week. So the original video or opening video was about the emotional bank account. And that concept can be a little bit challenging, but kind of the main point and me wanting to include that was to kind of help you with this idea that relationships actually exist outside of ourselves, right? The relationship isn't us. We have two individuals, and then the relationship almost is its own entity between the two individuals. And relationships with no two relationships we have with anyone are the same, right? Because it's a combination of the two people who are in relationship creating the account together, or the entity together. So no two are ever the same. And that keeping these relationships healthy requires nurturing and attention from both parties, especially when one or both parties are taking withdrawals from the shared account. Then nurturing is definitely required, or figuring out strategic deposits, or figuring out how to curb the flow of withdrawals that are going out if they're kind of one-sided or unhealthy, or like I talked about, both individuals could be having no no funds left in their emotional bank accounts personally, and then drawing on the relationship account in order to fill their personal buckets, right? So it's figuring out what's going on with all of that and how to have conversations about it if that's needed. But interestingly, if there are no withdrawals going out of a relationship bank account, there's not really as much need to put in regular deposits, just like with any account, right? But that also necessitates that if attention isn't being paid to the relationship, that feels okay to both parties. Because if not, it might feel like with withdrawals coming out to one side, when the other person might be thinking, oh, everything's great, right? Because they don't know they're taking withdrawals. Does that make sense, right? So this is, it's complicated and dynamic, but the idea of it is just a little bit helpful to think that there's two sides to each relationship, but also what one does or doesn't do can deeply affect the other ones, especially if they're trying to be the one to mostly maintain the relationship. So did anyone have any questions about that part? Made sense?
That makes it clearer anyway. I was kind of like not quite following in the video, but that makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little complicated. It can be a
I've
lot.
never, it was Stephen Covey that,
The
or,
emotional bank account idea was Stephen Covey. Yeah.
yeah, I've never read any of his stuff, so I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. Yeah. Put it down as another thing, extra resource if you ever need one, right? Or want to look into it more.
Yeah, I don't need another resource. I got so many already.
And as with everything in the class, as I mentioned before last time, the pieces and the components that are helpful to you or add to your understanding, take those. If something doesn't or doesn't mesh, let it go, right? Don't spend time worrying about it if it isn't helpful for you. Not all lessons will be super helpful for everybody. Hey, Colleen. Yay.
Hi.
Okay. Hi. So did you have any questions about the emotional bank account?
No, I'm definitely familiar with Stephen Covey's work, so I appreciated being able to see it with the horse interaction.
Mm.
So, because I think my big thing is, like, I teach this content, but it's about me practicing it with humans versus the animals, but how the animals can demonstrate it so much more clearly than we do.
Exactly. Yeah,
I just want to interrupt. I want to interrupt so that Colleen knows she's being recorded.
Yep.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah,
Yep,
we are.
I know.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, that's beautiful. And you just summarized like a lot of the reason why I like using horse behavior and horse interactions to teach this stuff is because they are much more clean about it all. But yes, um, and that helps us simplify things that may seem really complicated in our human world.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Or even
All right.
how the other thing that struck me is on the flip side of that, how sometimes we anthropomorphize the horse's behavior and
Yeah.
layer in things that are not there. So really getting
Correct.
clear about like, okay, is that my story or is that really what just happened?
Yes. Yes. We often project, right? And that's a real
Mhm.
thing to ask ourselves or just to reflect on, like, when are we having empathy because we recognize, like Shannon last time talked about, I think, being able to recognize some ways that her horse was feeling, right?
Mhm.
So that's not anthropomorphism if we're actually having empathy and recognizing what another is going through or experiencing. But there's projection when there's a behavior and we project onto the horse or onto someone else what we think is happening there. And that can be a fine line, right? And there are even sometimes when I can ask myself, I think I'm having empathy, but I could be projecting, and just being aware of that. And like, let me look for more evidence, or let me wait and see how this plays out and see if I can get clearer on that. So just the awareness that we know we have a tendency to project. And
Mhm.
so can we continue to be open to that, or hold open that thought that it's possible we might be.
Yeah.
Yeah. With
Thank you.
horses or people. We can ask a little more easily if we're comfortable asking. Horses, sometimes we really have to investigate further. All right, and so then the next reading was about clean relations, and I just really loved that term of clean because I think it just sounds so so many relationships are messy, right? They feel messy. So I just really liked the way that she used that terminology of clean relations. So it happens when the connections, interactions, and check-ins between people are consistently based in like genuine care, honesty, transparency, where we're not pretending, we're not playing games, and we're not manipulating, right? Either consciously or unconsciously. That's when things become really unclean, or we're not representing ourselves accurately or failing to represent ourselves. All of those things can make a relationship unclean. So, was there anybody who had questions or anything after that little reading? Did you raise your hand if you found that helpful? It's okay if you didn't. Just always curious. Yeah, found that a little helpful. Okay. All right. And then we moved into the self-assessment. And I think the key part of that self-assessment really, I hope, was for you guys to have a chance to really be honest about the question about who can you say no to, right? Who in your life can you say no to? And I want you to know that, like, anybody you listed there, that's your trusted tribe, right? Those are sacred people. If you feel safe enough, if you have anyone in your life right now that you feel safe enough to say no to, that's a blessing, right? To be grateful for that. And then the other one that's key is who you listed under who do you wish you could say no to, right? Because if you wish you could say no to them, that tells me that those relationships are important to you in some way. They might be important to you because they mean something to you. They could also be important because maybe they're one that it's a family member or a work relationship that you can't, is in your life, right? And so you have to continue to deal with it. And it's important to you in that regard because it's, at least for now, it's in your life and it's not something you can just walk away from easily. So those are important. And I'd love, I don't want you to have to give any details, but anybody want to share if there's someone you wish you could say no to, just what kind of relation are they to you? Are they a professional peer? Are they a coworker? Are they a family member? Anybody want to? Okay, Colleen,
Yeah, it's a coworker and I guess boss.
a
Not,
coworker.
I'm not, it's unclear the roles, so I think that's part of it.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that you noticed that that already makes it muddy, right?
Yeah. It's yeah, so I'm employed as an independent contractor. Um, and it's the barn owner.
Okay.
So like owning like what is that relationship? Because I think the lines get blurred sometimes. It was like familial at sometimes, and then
Mm.
right now it's not so great. So
Yeah, independent contractor positions can be quite complicated. There is technically like someone's the hired and someone's the hiree, but the nature of independent contractor is that you can't really be treated like a regular employee, right?
mhm.
So they can't dictate your hours, they can't dictate, it's really like, here's the job, I'm hiring you to do it, but you get to be in control of a lot of the other parameters. So yes, that can be tricky for both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Who else wants to share what kind of relationship the person or one of the people that you would like to be able to say no to? What are their relation to you?
I also have a professional peer that it's difficult. I tend to take on too much stuff because it's
Mm,
just challenging to say, no, that's not in my job description. That's your job, not mine. So
yes. Yes. So is this person above you in a hierarchy or is it a peer?
I think we're pretty equal.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Yep.
they do write the check.
Mm. So kind of a similar situation to the
Yeah,
independent contractor,
similar. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Anyone else?
I would say I have somebody who I guess I would call a friend, but it was somebody that kind of also turned into family that I feel like I've drifted from. And so, you know, not clear expectations anymore of me, honoring that I don't feel so close to them anymore, and that being okay.
Not being okay. So would that fall into like one I talked about where there's maybe not any attention being paid to the emotional bank account, like the shared account right now, or
I
no?
think the opposite, like it used to be so much, but now I don't have anything left to give them at the moment.
Ah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I don't think it's a clean relationship just because I'm sure there's conversation that will need to be had at some point.
yeah. Okay. But you're needing to say no because your emotional bank account is empty.
Yeah.
Now. Yeah. Okay. Great. Carol or Mary, either of you have anything you want to share?
The
It's
only
okay to
thing
say
I
no
could,
to.
the only thing I can say is I couldn't come up with somebody that I need to say no to. My issue seems to be when I say no, I feel ashamed or guilty. And so I'll ruminate on that. Doesn't mean that I say yes, but it just means like I'm a bad person. I should have said yes. I should have done this. I shouldn't have said, and go through all that stuff. But
Yes. All the mental
uh,
talk.
especially after having, being disabled um, with a funky disability that uh, I've found it. I found that one of the reasons why some people would or scientists would say I survived all of that is because I said no. And it's like, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm
Mhm.
not going there. No, not it. And yeah, it isolated me. That's the other side of the whole thing is that it isolates me. But generally speaking, I've been pretty happy just hanging out with my dogs, horses, and just being home and not having anyone. Because actually, when people are around, and I'll get to that in the video. But anyway, I'm just more like, just leave me alone, go away, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a different. I know at one point when I was working, I probably had people I wanted to say no to and felt I couldn't, but that's not an issue. And I don't have kids, so I don't have to think about saying no to them either.
So that's kind of nice. So you can enjoy right now the fact
Yeah,
that right now you don't have anyone that you wish you could say no to. that
Yeah.
you, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's a win.
Yep. I don't feel guilty about the times I do go, they think I'm this or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, well, we're gonna work more on that. We're gonna be talking more about that in the class, because that is a separate but also very big challenge. Yeah. Mary, you want to add anything or no?
I think I sort of always had such a hard time saying no that I always said yes, and I didn't even know there's an option because I was deeply entrenched in the Southern Be Nice thing. So um I just did it, and I just thought, well, I'll just get through this. But it was not something I thought was an option to say no. So finally, I've gotten to the point that I can say no, and it has limited people in my life, but they probably weren't there for a good reason anyway. So it's certainly a challenge for me, but it's one that I've learned to handle better. It's a work in progress.
Yeah. So since you've been able to, you have said no, although it's had consequences, right? Is there anyone right now that you're struggling with that you wish you could say no to, but you can't? Or do you feel like you're doing pretty good at saying no when you need to?
I'm
want-
doing well doing it, but I still have the little edge of guilt come in, like I'm not quite up to par because I can't keep up. I don't have the energy to do everything I used to do, and so people keep nagging about it, and I'm just taking better care of myself, which is good in one way and limiting in another. So
Yeah.
it's a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, so one of the things that, and Mary, this has been going on for a while, and it goes on for most of us when, can't remember if I talked about the hand and glove before. So when we are in week 3, we're going to talk a lot more about people pleasing. But when that is our tendency, right? Most of the people who have been attracted to us in our life are people who like to be in relationship with people pleasers, right?
Yes.
So when we shift that pattern, the relationship doesn't fit anymore. Either those people leave because you're not accommodating them anymore, or like you said, Mary, they may dig in a little deep, little harder and like keep pressuring, right? Like they can't figure out like what's going on here. That's not who, going to keep at, or they just don't accept this new dynamic in the relationship, which is sometimes I say no, right? So that's challenging, right? But I really, I think both of you have heard you say that there's more peace in your life. There may be loneliness, right? And sometimes Carol may not even be feeling the loneliness right now, right? So there's sometimes we're so relieved to not have that pressure anymore that it just feels really good to be alone. But then what we can start doing is getting in our own head about, what's wrong? I shouldn't be by myself all the time. This isn't healthy, right? What does it say about me? So all the like head talk happens. So I'm sure that's probably partly what's going on for both of you. But Mary, let me ask you the question. Did you have anyone you could list on the that I feel safe or comfortable saying no to? Did you have anyone you could put on that list?
I say it, but I still have some guilt with it.
Okay.
And
So
pretty much saying I'm taking care of myself, and I'm sorry you don't like it, but this is it. But I still have that little edge.
that little edge. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
say it out to everybody now.
Good. Good.
Mhm.
All right. So another one you don't have to answer this right now, but to think about is in those situations where you still have the guilt or the edge about it, is it because they really aren't very accepting of the no, or they're judging it, or is it your own self-talk, right? Is there evidence that your no makes them uncomfortable? There is evidence? Yeah.
I get a silent treatment most of the time.
Yep. Okay. Yes. So that's probably back to that pattern of those people are not happy with the change in you, right?
Right.
And it's more about them, but it still can be very isolating, even though
Yeah.
they're not doing their work, right? Okay. All right. Okay, good. So I feel like you all are getting a good sense of kind of what's going on in the relationships, who you have or don't have in your tribe. And there's no judgment on it, right? This is just an assessment of where we are. So that's the other key, is don't judge yourself about how that comes out. All right. So I think that we talked a little bit about this. I think you all talked about this, but let me know if there's something else you want to say about it. Is what was the obstacle, or what is the obstacle to saying no in those situations? And I think mostly have identified those, but something to think about, and this is just where we do our own, like in talking about clean relations, is like, what is the part of the work that I can own, right? And so that is, if there's an obstacles to saying no that you feel, is there anything that you can do to clean up your end of the relationship? Meaning, have you inadvertently been doing any of those things? Like, am I giving someone the silent treatment? Am I being manipulative? Am I projecting feelings on them that may not be true? Right? So that's the part that's our work to do, is to really be clear that we're not doing what we think we're accusing somebody else of doing, right? That's the part of cleaning up our end, and making sure that we're not taking withdrawals out of the shared bank account that we may not be aware are withdrawals, but might feel like a withdrawal to someone else. So it's just an exercise of putting yourself in the other person's shoes and saying, how does this all feel to them? And again, we want to start with, this is a relationship that matters to you. Because if it's not a relationship that matters to you, there's no point in doing all the work around it, right? So that's the first thing we have to be honest about, or that either matters to us, or that, employment situation is it's in our life. So we need to work on it. So making sure we're being as clean as possible on our end of the relationship, that we are pretty sure we're not taking out withdrawals, or if we're not sure, that's the time to maybe start asking some questions about how the other person feels about the dynamic. They may have a very different perception of what's happening than we do. And it can be, you don't have to resolve it in that initial conversation. It can just be a conversation about, I want to understand how this is feeling for you, right? Which might be different than how it's feeling for me. And then if you discover that there's something that you've been doing that you can own, clean up your part first, right? And sometimes if we clean up our part, and everything shifts, all the energy shifts. So that's just something to think about and to play with. If we clean up our part and we feel like we're as healthy as we can be on our end, and the dynamic is still not good, feels icky, feels unclean, feels messy, then we can feel pretty confident it's the other person, right? And it's not, if it hasn't shifted because we cleaned up ours. Sometimes if we make an effort to clean up ours, then they start looking at themselves a little bit more. Maybe I should clean up my end too, right? So it's kind of like, are we going to be the adult? And if the relationship matters to us, are we going to like make it important to clean up our part? Right? So that's just taking all that a little bit deeper. Okay. Now going into the practicing of saying no this week. First, want to know about the affirmations. Did you find the affirmations helpful? Yes.
Most definitely.
Okay. Those are often a really good thing, whichever ones of those you found helpful, or to keep that list before you say no to someone, if you have time to like do those affirmations. Get yourself grounded and centered first, right? So that you can come from a place of like standing firm in what you know to be true and how you value yourself. Okay, so keep those, print those out, keep those with you. All right, so now I want to have, if any of you are willing to share, anything about what was the situation that you said no to this week, if there was one, and how did it go? How did you feel about it? How did the other person receive it? Just no judgment. This is just like, there's no, however it went, right? It's all stuff to learn from. So anybody want to volunteer first? All right, Colleen.
So I don't know that it was a clear no, but
Okay.
it was at least time to sit down, and I was trying to hear what the other person wanted. And I tried to communicate what I felt differently about.
Okay.
And then realized that I wasn't going to be able to influence them and didn't necessarily feel heard. So I was able to say, like, I don't know that I can keep doing this because it just feel good. Like it, and it's not just for me. Like, I think there's complications to it, but
You're breaking up just a little bit.
interesting. Oh. So the interesting thing about that, though, was that are you still able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. When I said I didn't know if I wanted to continue running something, the immediate response was I needed to think long and hard about that.
Was that you needed to think long and hard about that?
Mm-hmm. And I have to admit that it was like made me extremely emotional because it made me feel like they don't know me well enough to know that I would think about that long and hard and how serious of a statement it would be. And then very interesting that I took that as a threat.
Well, I was going to say, yeah. Did it feel like a threat? And it may have been, right? It may have been that person's response to feeling threatened by the thought of losing you, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think it kind of resonated with what you were talking about earlier about as we start to say no when we haven't been, like if we've been people pleasing.
Yes.
And at the same time, I think the other piece that you said there before we transitioned to this was, am I keeping my side of the relationship clean? And I'm not, because I've definitely gone introverted and isolated myself because I didn't feel safe. And that was trying to like organize, okay, what is real? What am I projecting? And then what am I taking on empathically that is not mine? Because I think that's another piece that I'm aware that I do.
Yep.
So really trying to, I think the excerpt about being clean was really helpful for me to be like, own my part of the accountability, like how I haven't communicated. And then recognizing and talking with some people that I felt safe with to identify not want to, well, I guess validate is the word, like validate the things that I've talked about or I've said to this in this relationship for years. Like, I don't know, when I had the conversation I had yesterday was like very validating that those were the same problems that are happening when she was at this facility. And I want to be careful there because I don't want it to be like a tit for tat or a like, I don't want to talk behind anyone's back. It was more like I needed to make sure, am I being unreasonable or am I being a baby about this? And then like, how do I communicate? And then at the same time, I think I'm at that place where the other piece you said was, is this a relationship worth holding on to? And I think previously, financially, I needed to, but I think I'm at a place now where I can't continue the toxicity.
Ooh, okay. So
Sorry.
no, that's really, really, really good. And I'm going to say you jumped right in. Like you didn't do like a baby no, like, oh, no to an invitation to a party. You went right into like a real big no that's been brewing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, I love that. But yeah, so take a deep breath and a congratulations on wow, like, right? You are like, I'm feeling ready to tackle a really big no, even though it's scary. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to get received well. And this is a long-standing pattern. And I just love that for your sake, I love that you're in a place financially that you don't feel trapped by this situation, right? And that's been probably the dynamic for a long time, right? Is you needed the money, you needed the job or the position, and so you were putting up with toxicity, right? And for someone to respond with, well, you better think long and hard about that, that's definitely a fairly toxic response, right? That's someone who isn't able to cope right now with the idea of you changing who you've been or having a more equal footing relationship where like we both have to be benefiting from this relationship in order for it to continue. It has to be working for both of us. That's not the mode it sounds like this person is used to operating in, or particularly not in this relationship at any rate. Yeah. So we can't control necessarily how someone else responds. And it will be interesting to see, like, what's the next step? Where did you leave it in that conversation?
Just that that I have been thinking about it and that there's a lot of different reasons. One of the things I did start to like explain some of the reasons, and then I realized that I didn't necessarily need to do that.
Right.
It's the pleaser in me that wants to explain why I'm at my threshold and overwhelmed. And then also able to say, like, when another statement was like, well, you're only here 4 days a week.
Is it 4 days of
And
your
I
life?
was, and so then it was like, oh, like there's a lot of other things that I do, like to run X, Y, and Z. Like the times that I'm here is only when I'm teaching and training, like the administrative work doesn't get done here.
Right.
And the negotiations and all that kind of stuff. And then yeah, that it just brought into light again that I think I don't feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay too, right? Like that I know that there's things that like I said, that I can hold myself accountable for that I haven't communicated, because at this point I don't feel like when I communicate them it changes anything. So my
So that's,
fault for not
yeah.
changing it sooner, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the real key there is that sometimes we have the perception that the other person isn't interested in or willing for things to change if I'm unhappy. And that may be true or it may not. So the first one is to like confirm, is that true or is it not? So you've now voiced some things. If that person doesn't come back after their initial, maybe shock, maybe hurt, whatever, right? Because you behave differently than you have been in the past. Give them a little time to see if they come back with any genuine interest about your experience, any genuine indication that they value you as a person and not just the job you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are some things you will be able to validate those based on the reaction. And I always like to hold out the possibility that if the person is, when I do voice how I'm feeling, the person is willing to come back to the table and talk about that and does genuinely seem to care, continue the conversation, right? But if not, then yeah, right? You might become more certain in your, it may go from, I don't know if I can continue this to I cannot continue this, which I kind of feel like you might already be there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just at that moment I wasn't ready to go there. Like the conversation just kind of happened. It was like right before the full moon.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is happening right now. Oh, okay.
Whew, yeah. Well, kudos to you, right, for stepping into that, how did you feel afterwards?
Sad, worried, but I think that was more the grief of like thinking the relationship is lost.
Yeah.
About just worried about the horses and the students that are involved in between.
Yep.
But knowing that I'm modeling healthy relationship, and that is my students see that as it is that I can teach them. And yeah, there's the possibility that this could end up differently than I expect. And if it doesn't, then I'm okay with it. Because I think that's the piece that I was holding on to for like the past 2 years, is I didn't know if I was okay with
Yeah.
like, could I, first it was like survival, but then that was the reality of like thinking like, it's the self-worth piece, right? That I could go somewhere else and work. Like there's no reason, like even if I didn't continue horse training, that I couldn't go back to the education system. Like anyway, just realizing that there's more options, and if I can stay true to myself, that's healthier in the long run for everybody.
Absolutely. Oh, amen to that, right? So scary. But yeah, if we stay in toxic relationship dynamics, at the end of the day, as adults, we don't really have anyone to blame except ourselves, because we do have choices. They might be scary, they might seem very overwhelming, but yeah, you've been in that one long enough to know that, right, the negative consequences of it on your psyche.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, kudos to you. Okay. Lots
Thank you.
really good going on there. All right. That was a big one. So let's see who else has one from this week, big or small. Anyone else say no to anything? Do not get no chance to practice it? Nothing you needed to say no to?
I also said no.
All right, Shane.
Someone asked if I wanted to get dinner with her and her kids, and thought about it for like 2.2 seconds and realized that I didn't feel like it. So I said, I'm sorry, I can't tonight, but I think that was it. And she just said, no problem, like, hope to see you soon. And I said, maybe before the kids go to camp next week. And she was like, that would be great. And that was it.
That sounds like you handled that beautifully. Did you still have any guilt over saying no, or how did you feel about it? No.
Not
Good.
in that situation.
Great. And that sounds like that was someone who received it just fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't take it personal. Beautiful. Is that something that in the past you would have said yes to, even though you didn't feel like it? Yeah.
200%.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Big win. Yay. And I'm glad it was a positive experience too. You didn't get pushback from that person.
Me too, which is also rare.
Yeah. And so that's also another thing, is like, I don't know how important that person is in your life, but that would be one of those where I go, okay, maybe that's a little check that person might move a little more into the trusted relationship category, right? Someone who can see and hear me and not judge me, and like cares about my experience as well. Or, some evidence toward that, right? So
Right.
worth exploring further if it's of interest. Yeah. All right. Shannon, did you get to say no this week?
Not this week, but I had a similar interaction like Colleen
Okay.
last year.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah, so it was with the person that I said I've had difficulty keeping that boundary drawn, although it's much better now than it used to be. But she just kept coming like, what's wrong with you? Like she kept trying to throw it right back on me, like I was the person that was in the wrong. I was the person that was messed up. And I'm just like, this just where it is, like I didn't budge, but I did withdraw. Which
Yeah.
probably wasn't the healthiest thing, but for me, it was the
No,
safest thing.
when there's a barrage at us, sometimes we need to withdraw, right? I mean, you don't have to stand and take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But since then, I've had to deal with that person this year a couple of times, and it's actually been a lot less uncomfortable. It's not comfortable, but it's not super uncomfortable anymore. So we must have jumped a hurdle somewhere along the way, and
So what do you
she-
think has shifted? Is she not having as much pushback when you say no? Are you, what do you think?
I think she realizes that when I say no, I say no. I'm saying no, and that
Beautiful.
I'm not invested in how my comfort with myself is not reliant on how she looks at me or how
Yeah.
she views me.
Yes.
So
Ooh, that's a huge statement right there, right? How
yeah,
someone else, yes, it's not a reflection on us. Yeah. Well, and think how different that could have gone if when she pressured you, right, with all that barrage, if you had then given in, right?
yeah. Well,
You
that's
would
worked
have
for her in
only
the past. It's worked for her in the past.
worked for her in the past.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it didn't work
Well,
for
you know
her,
what?
and she escalated.
Let's give a little kudos to her that even though you didn't, she's still in a relationship with you.
Right, because well, it's beneficial for her to not ditch the relationship. So
Well, that could probably be true. I bet you I could say the same for Colleen's person.
right,
That
right,
person may or may not come around, right?
right.
But the dynamic, the logistic, the details could be different of those two situations.
And I'm also working on developing someone else who can take over my role in that group so that I don't have to continue to be in that toxic place. So I can remove
Beautiful.
myself from there.
So here's a tricky question. As you develop the person who's going to be stepping in, do you feel like that person has the skills to cope with that toxic situation? Or
Yeah.
are you giving them a heads up that there is some toxic dynamic or some, challenging dynamics?
I think she's well aware.
She's well aware. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, then that's her choice to make. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Good. Thank you for sharing that. Mary, anything? Did we already go to? No. Did you say no to anything this week?
I don't think I've had to.
All right. Well, that's a win too.
I did say no to 2 invitations, and I just flat out said it, and pretty much silent treatment, but I didn't care.
Yeah. Every time you get silent treatment, that's just an affirmation, right? Of who they are and what kind of relationship they want to be in, and that's not right. So,
Yep.
yep. And it's hard when that's everybody around you right now. Yeah. So my no this week was an interesting one because it wasn't even a no to the person, but I got asked by a friend. So how do I even say this? Well, actually, Shannon and Shay were at the Lockheed clinic this year, so you'll know the players of this. So there's another person young woman from Aiken, who's a body worker, craniosacral body worker, who is coming to Charleston to see some clients, right? And so another mutual friend of ours, Claire, so I'm giving more details, but just because you guys know the situation, Claire contacted me to say that this person was coming into town and trying to book her schedule for craniosacral work. And, I know you have a horse that's struggling with such and such. Would you want to be on her? Basically, I think trying to say, I'm trying to help fill this person's schedule. And would you like to get on the docket for that? And my first reaction, was I really, really adored this person when I met her at the clinic. And I'm sure she's wonderful at what she does. And I would love to support her. But at the same time, I'm already getting that same kind of work done with my horse by someone else, right? And I don't really have the extra budget to just throw because I'd love to support her. That's just not in my budget right now. So that was one of those where, like, in my heart, I really would like to say yes, but I really didn't need the service, and financially, it would be an almost irresponsible thing for me to do right now, to do that just because I wanted to, make the person feel better. And I probably wasn't going to be able to be a repeat client for her anyway, right? And then you know how that goes. Like if I say yes this time, then next time she comes in town, right? So there's that whole thing. So this was just one of those. I wish I didn't have to say no, but I felt like for me, the smart thing to do, and probably for her in the long run, was to say no. because that gives her a chance to fill that slot with somebody else who may be a returning client for her, right? To build her clientele here. Luckily, when I said no, it wasn't to the original person. It was just to my friend Claire. And she was like, oh, I understand completely. So it was fine. But it was interesting to note that even in myself, even though I don't need the service, I still had that inclination to want to say yes, right? To support the person, because it's someone that I like. So that was my no. It was all pretty simple, but it was interesting to watch my own reaction and my own people-pleasing inclination, again, to want to say yes. And in a way, that's kind of egotistical to be like, to think that this person even needs me to fill a slot, right? That if that makes sense, in a way, like she might need my charity help to fill her slots in some ways, you know? So it's just kind of all interesting how the games that we play. And there are other ways that I can, you know, be a supportive friend to this person without necessarily becoming a client. When I also don't want to be disrespectful to the person I have who's already doing that work with me. That would be another thing. Not that that person would necessarily have to know, but still, or it could put me in a bad situation if they give different suggestions or protocols, and I have two conflicting professionals, right, trying to treat the same horse. So anyway, that was my no for this week. And Carol, you said you didn't have one, or you did?
Not in this week, because I only read through everything last night, and I said I got to remember what to do this earlier in the week, because there's going to be something I'm supposed to be looking at. And
yeah, there's always an experiential work. Yeah.
and I forgot. And yeah, so but I, as everyone's talking, I've come up with at least 4 different situations where I said no and got pushback, either guilted or anger or manipulation, and I still would say no, except then there was one time I didn't. But like one's work, one's family, or my husband's family, my husband, and a riding instructor. So I don't know if you want me to go
So
into one of those.
there was one where you said, the others you said you got pushed back, but you still said no. One of them you might have changed your answer.
Oh yeah. So that was my mother-in-law, who's no longer with us. So it's not gonna happen again. My husband and his family are, or at least his parents, are people pleasers to the max, to the extent that it appeared that this was something they were doing out of the kindness of their heart, and there were no no quid pro quo. And I'm used to people with the quid pro quos. It's like, I'm going to help you with the intent, one day I'm going to need your help and you're going to help me. And when I said no to their request, or if I didn't give them the proper thanks afterwards, I'd get the, it's not me. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. And you didn't say anything. But anyway, getting back to my original. So when I first met my husband, and we were still dating, whatever, I had a dog, and we were going to be going away. I had got a kennel place for her while I was away, and my husband's mother said, oh, we could take care of the dog. And at first I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I don't have to put her in a kennel and pay for it and all that stuff.
Right.
But then she came up with the weekend she'd be taking our dog, or my dog. She was visiting her daughter, who had a dog that was very territorial. And I just kind of thought, oh, that doesn't sound like a good situation for my dog to come into that dog's territory and possibly get hurt. And so I said, I declined. And she got so angry at me. So this was like, oh, there's the quid pro quo. If she offers, I have to say yes. But if I ask, then she may or may not want to do what I'm asking, and then she'll not say no, but just either do it her way anyway, or so. I mean, and it was like, that's different. But I
Mm.
Because everyone thinks, oh, you let her take care of the dog, and then she was mad. No, she was mad because I wouldn't let her take care.
So there's
And
definitely
anyway,
some lessons
yeah,
in that. And
and
one of the,
I did say yes after she got mad at me because I'm thinking, this is a new relationship, blah blah blah,
Mm.
and and afterwards it was fun. I mean, the dog ended up not getting mauled by them. It just was, uh,
Was it, so it ended up being okay, the dog was safe,
yeah,
but there's still a
yeah,
scenario there, right?
yeah.
Of and
And oh, sorry.
one of the things that can help in these situations sometimes, at least help you have a clearer like negotiating table, is like when someone offers to help with something. A lot of times I feel like, oh, I'm so grateful they offered to help, I need to say yes, right? But is to say, well, thank you so much for that offer, but let me make sure this is something you can really do. Here are my criteria, right? I have the kennel I can use, right? These are I prefer my dog to be alone, not with other dogs, like at your house, or maybe we come and do a visit, something, right? To make sure that we're both on the same page about what the agreement is. Because some people too don't have any idea. They think all dogs get along, right? Oh, it'll be more fun. Let's just have more dogs together, right? Someone who hasn't had a lot of experience with dogs. Oh, Colleen's saying she wishes she could stay, but she has a student. Okay, thank you, Colleen. You can watch the recording back too for the Q&A if you want, if you need to. All right. Yeah, so making sure that the parameters are really clear, right? When someone does us a favor, what's that old musical? Anyway, it was like some kinds of help are the kind of help we all can do without, um, not all favors are actually what we need or helpful. And especially if it's involving an animal or a child or somebody else, right, that we're responsible for, we may have certain criteria. I've had many people offer to feed my horses when I'm out of town. Um, you know, given my horses and especially one of mine, and she can be, anyway, I know that it's not really safe for people, and that my horses can get really out of sorts if things aren't done in a very particular way. So like my neighbor who offers, I just thank you, but no thank you, right? So anyway, some of that is us catching ourselves, right? Making sure that if someone offers to do something, that it's someone that we feel really good, that it's going to be okay. And otherwise they may still get their feelings hurt when we say no. Like she probably would have had her feelings hurt no matter what you said, but thankfully everything was okay in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they took care of our dogs after that, but that was the only time that, oh, you didn't add that in. And I'm somebody who will, and I'm not sure if I mentioned that here or not. I don't ask questions. That was sort of beat out of me as a child, don't ask questions. And so I always assume, always, that I and I don't even, the questions don't even enter my head. I mean, it's that bad that, when things don't go right, well, did you set this? No, because I had no clue that was that I wasn't clear, and to ask questions is just like,
It's uncomfortable. Yeah.
yeah, very, very. And don't yell at me for asking this. I don't want to get into an argument with you or whatever. So I'm very hesitant to ask, and at the same time, I don't even know that I need to ask. It's like it's just totally.
Yeah.
So what you just said, actually, I would like to think that way, but I just get totally messed up in my head when I have to formulate a question or even like with the boarding situation I have, certain things I thought were clear or clean, and then I would say something and it wouldn't happen, and then I'd find out later, well, you didn't call me back, or you didn't this, or you didn't that, and I'm like, I thought I said that. even in a text, I wrote it. I know I wrote it. I can even make sure I wrote it.
Yeah.
And still, like, it's, yeah. So and then, yeah, I think I have a life coach. She suggested I make more things clear, and but that's the issue, is I don't know. I'm making all these assumptions, and then I need to ask questions.
So, but just by speaking it, you at least have the awareness that you don't know, right? So that should be enough to be able to, if nothing else, a good strategy is when people offer something, or is to say, I really appreciate that offer. Let me think about it and let me get back to you with more details, or we can talk a little bit more about what that entails, right? Just avoid saying the immediate yes. That alone, knowing, right, what you know, is just commit to that. I'm not saying no. I'm saying thank you. Let me think about it. Let me pull together the details that I can share with you, and then we can decide if it's going to be a good fit, right? Then all of those things are kind of laid out. That would be my recommendation, rather than just saying, getting overwhelmed and saying I don't think about it, or I go into like panic or trauma response and I just say yes.
Yeah.
Is just work on that first little shift of not saying yes right away. And you can even practice writing down or whatever, a couple different ways you could say the sentence that just buys you a little more time to think about it or lay it out. And then when we represent it, is like, I want to make sure this is a win-win for both of us. Right? So these are my expectations. It's perfectly okay if you can't meet these. I have a plan B, right? So that it just lays it out so it can come across as like not a harsh no, but really like, I just really want to make sure this is good for both of us. That's good, clean relations, right? Yep. So just knowing that you have that tendency to automatically say yes and people please and fawn in that way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't have thought of it as people pleasing, because it's more of a, oh yeah, that sounds good, and then making these assumptions that I tend to make about what I just agreed to, and then finding out
Without having a more detailed conversation, right? To make sure.
Yeah. It's like, oh, cool. But to say, okay, I want to make sure we're on the same page here. Blah blah
Yes.
blah 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 blah. Again, that's the thing that doesn't occur, because my brain automatically goes into, oh yeah, that sounds good. That's cool.
So catch yourself. Just practice catching yourself when you when you see that I'm going into that pattern again, right? Even if it's after the fact, you can go, I just totally did that again, right? And then you could follow back up with the person and say, I know I said yes, but now I've been thinking about it. I want to really make sure that this is good for both of us, right? So you can even have a second chance, even if you don't have the response you want to in the moment. You can still circle back around.
Yep, that's another one. Yeah, getting a second chance. I usually think, oh, that's it. I did it. I don't, I blew it, and there's no point in going back, because I just make it more of a mess.
Nope.
But yeah, that's all.
Another chance to keep it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's chat for a few minutes about the horse behavior video. I love the comments in the classroom about that. And I think, now that we're hearing Carol, I hear like, and I think it was really, really good that you brought up, is it a trauma response if when someone keeps asking, right, I feel trapped or pressured or like, oh my God, why are you still asking? And the answer is that sometimes it can be. Other times is that someone can be being like, won't let it go, right? And so it's beautiful to see which ways that felt to each of you. So I'd love to go around just real quick and see what was your perception of that conversation between Rayleigh and Shiloh about the stick. Not based on anybody else's comments, but when you watched it, how did you feel about it? So I'm just going to go in the order you're on my screen. So Shannon, you're first. What was your?
I just felt Rayleigh was politely saying no each time, and the other guy would be like, oh, come on, man, don't you want to play? No, really not comfortable with that stick, thanks. And I was glad to see that you wrote that afterwards he did lay it down and let it go, because it was like you reminded me of my 5-year-old. He just kept pushing. But it was a very nicely put no from the other horse. It wasn't overly aggressive. It was just no and walk away. So
Yeah.
I like the way he handled that.
Yeah, he did handle it really quite well, especially if he was having a little bit of a trauma
Yeah.
response.
But you could see he was like, no, keep
Stick his
that away
face,
from me.
right? Okay. Shayla, what was your interpretation of it when you watched it?
I think mine's a little bit different just because I know them both. If I'm thinking about what Rayleigh was like when I first met him and like all that anxious energy he used to have and like not necessarily knowing what to do, what was in his body, I love to see him asking, but it's not like his ask was aggressive, you know? I just think it was very consistent and steady, but with a lot of grace behind it. And I just think knowing that the relationship that has evolved between him and Shiloh, I don't think Shiloh's response was very big either, as big as it could have been, you know, if it were a human. So I don't know. I just think like he was very consistent, but not persistent in an annoying, you know, like leave me alone type way.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. And that's a good point. Like, so we don't always, when we watch an interaction, we don't know the personal growth on either side of the ones, like they're both we're all imperfect individuals, right? It was actually a pretty big deal for Rayleigh to have the confidence to even be asking the question multiple times. And for someone who's not real, or someone, well, I consider animals someone's, who hasn't always felt confident, like doing that kind of thing, initiating play, initiating a question like that. I was proud of him, right? That he didn't just take the no and like give up right away. Like he was kind of like, yeah, what I want, we play this game. Come on, like this is okay is for me to ask you about this, right? You sure you don't want to? I'd like to, So yeah, that was kind of beautiful to see in him too. So cool. All right, Mary, what about you?
I would say the same thing. I just thought it was so cool to see Rayleigh just being a big boy and stepping up to big old Shiloh, who is pretty intimidating. And he was very, very kind and not really pushy, but he just kept, come on, we'll have a good time. And I just love Rayleigh. He's just the coolest horse. And he might be small, but he's big in heart. I just adore him. So it was very clean to me. I loved it.
I thought it was really quite clean on both their parts. They were both clear, right? You could watch it and know their intentions. There was I don't feel like there was any manipulation, even
No.
when asked repeatedly. He was asking the same question, right, in just different ways, and he was kind of like, I want to make sure I'm getting is this no a real no?
Yeah.
maybe there's a chance it could be a yes. And Shiloh was no, but he wasn't, like those who know Shiloh, he can be quite volatile if he wants to be. So like he could have had a very explosive no. And you don't know that when you're watching. It's set up that way. So nobody knows the history. Most people don't know the history when they're watching it. But in the resource guarding hierarchy, Shiloh is well higher. He's at the top and Rayleigh's near the bottom. So it took a lot of confidence for Rayleigh to initiate the interaction, right? Because he definitely had no power in the relationship to force, or even pressure really Shiloh into doing something he didn't want to do. But you don't know that when you're watching the video. So actually I was surprised Shiloh stayed engaged in the conversation as long as he did and didn't just be like, I'm out, right? This conversation's over. So I think it showed on both of their parts a lot of care and concern about the relationship, maybe even more so than the game, although Rayleigh was pretty committed to the game. But they both also showed a lot of respect for the conversation itself, I think. But Carol, I loved. So yeah, tell again, if anyone didn't read her comment, like how you felt. Yeah.
And And yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, I'm thinking of a situation way back when that probably would trigger me. And it's the persistence that made me like, all right, I said no, go away, leave me alone, stop. You know, and Shiloh's reaction, even though, you know, in context, wasn't much. To me, it was a clear,
Fair enough.
I'm scared, you know, get away from me with that thing.
Mhm.
And twice at least, I think. The other time, there was a few times when he kind of like, okay, I'll walk with you, but I'm not. And when he was standing in front of
Really?
Rayleigh, and Rayleigh had the stick, and he's kind of like nuzzling him, like, okay, I want to be near you, but I'm not gonna take that stick. And he walked away. I thought, all right, for me, that probably would have been we can end it here. But he kept going. He went back again, and this time when he swung around, Shiloh again shied somewhat to the right, if I'm remembering correctly,
Yep.
and I just was like that. I think that was the point where I just went, you know, all right, you're not listening to me, and you're scaring me, and or threatening me, or you're pressuring me, or I don't like this. Go away, and kind of that panic. So at
Yeah.
first, yeah, now that I'm talking, yeah, at first it's annoying. It's like, I don't want to do that. Oh, please. No, I don't want to do that. And then if it comes back to, all right, how about now? That's when the panic sets in. So maybe the third time is also my time for
Panic. Yeah. And it probably goes, it's, and there's no right or wrong answers, right? It would have been okay for Shiloh to have said a hard no after the first one, right?
Yeah.
So it's just honoring that that was how their relationship went. And depending on the history, again, if this was something that like, so interestingly, Rayleigh never picked up a stick. I have not to this day seen him pick up another big stick and try to offer it to Shiloh. In fact, I don't even see them play the stick game very often anymore at all. So it's interesting. It might have shifted something. I did see him after that pick up small sticks a couple more times than they played. So that might have been like saying, I got the message. So there definitely was some clear communication that happened there that they both understood. But if Rayleigh had repeatedly, day after day, kept trying to have that same conversation, right, that it might have gotten more heated between them, or Shiloh could have gotten much more. So I think that Shiloh, he has a lot of mentoring. He's an interesting Mustang. He seems to want to bring out confidence in Rayleigh in lots of different ways. So it was interesting to watch him say, even though I'm really uncomfortable with this situation, I don't want to like make you feel bad for asking. Almost like, right? I almost want to be like proud of you for asking, but this isn't going to happen, right? This isn't going to happen for me. So anyway, really interesting dynamic. And I think the thing I'd love for you to take away the most is that it was a conversation, and they did both show that they cared about the relationship, even though Rayleigh did have a very clear agenda, a clear thing he wanted out of it. And that Shiloh was not trapped. So this idea of we're not trapped, right? Anytime we start to feel like we're trapped, we need to realize we probably are starting to have a little bit of a trauma response, and we all have them in different situations, right? But as adults, we almost always have a way out, right? We forget it, but we almost always, like as children, we may not have had a way out, right? And that's the trauma that's still there for us. But as adults, we can make a choice to leave. We can make a choice to walk away. We can make a choice to end the relationship if we have to, whatever we have to do to remind ourselves that we are not trapped. So this is deep internal work that comes in for us. And I feel like Shiloh did know in that situation he could leave. And I think he didn't panic totally, because I think he knew he wasn't trapped and he could walk away. Yeah. So excellent. And got like 15 minutes left. So I'm going to just give a brief intro into week 3. So you know what you're going to be getting into next. And we're going to dive even deeper into the whole people pleasing codependency aspect in week 3, because it's huge. We got to keep going there because that's where the work is, honestly. And for those who don't know, you'll hear this in the video, but codependency, this transformed me when I first learned this, that codependency is actually the addiction to looking outside of ourselves for our own happiness, or the key to our happiness, or the key to our unhappiness even, right? But generally we do it looking for something outside of ourselves to make us feel safe, to make us feel happy, content, better, whatever, right? And codependency is the addiction that all other addictions are based in, right? Whether it's alcoholism, we're looking to alcohol to make us happy, make us feel better, make the world seem less harsh, right? Whether it's a food addiction, whether it's cigarettes, alcohol, screen time, right? We all have addictive tendencies, but it's all based in this codependency that something outside of me is going to make me feel better or make me not have to deal with the discomfort that I'm feeling inside. That's the basis of codependency. So yeah, we're going to dig deep into people-pleasing tendencies this week. And in the experiential practice, you're going to learn a little bit more about taking the power pause, which is kind of what I was saying to Carol. Take a power pause before we say yes, right? Or ask for a little space before we say yes. Because if we have people-pleasing tendencies, if we have trauma in our past, those initial things are going to want to take over, like in the moment. So the power pause is really powerful, and you're going to be learning about that this week. And we're also going to practice noticing our own self-talk, this negative self-talk that's passing judgment or calling ourselves stupid, or I messed up with that, or I can't do this, whatever, right? Whatever's going on in our heads, and we all have it. This is human nature. So it's mainly about, we can't necessarily just stop that. That's not something we can turn off, but we can figure out how to pause it, how to take breaks, and how to, a lot of times just breaking the cycle of it is enough if we then know what to do to like move ourselves in a little bit more positive direction once we have that little break. So you're going to be learning about that. And then there's 2 horse videos coming up this week. Maybe I'm making up for not having one in the first week, but one is an example. Both of them are horse to human dynamic examples this time. And one is an example of how, generally speaking, horses do not demonstrate the same people-pleasing tendencies that we have. Dogs, I think, actually sometimes do a lot of people-pleasing stuff. Horses generally don't. That's not to say that there aren't some horses that have kind of resorted to fawning as a survival mechanism, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, generally speaking, horses don't do a lot just to please us. And so you get to watch the dynamic and see the difference between like how it kind of makes you uncomfortable to be like, gosh, that horse could let the person know, right, that they like them or whatever. But anyway, it's about how horses don't do that. And then the second one is 2 people. It's actually me and 2 individuals. It's me and Shiloh, but it's us trying to, as we were early on getting to know each other, trying to learn how to be in relationship with each other without expecting the other to be something we're not. And that was easy for Shiloh. Shiloh didn't have horses, again, don't do that. He just expected me to be me, but me not wanting to project what I wanted Shiloh to be or how I wanted him to be, and just letting him be who he was. And it was a struggle, but you'll see I was doing my best with it. And it was a clip of us doing pretty well with that, given the circumstances. So you'll get to watch those 2 videos, and then, yeah. So a chance to be a little bit more cleaner. And you can practice doing that with the horses in your lives too this week, of going into an interaction. Like, as I said with Shiloh and Rayleigh, that were trying to put the relationship above whatever the agenda was, right? So can we do that in our relationship with our horses too? and play with that. Even if it's just a scenario when you don't have to have something done, right? But maybe you'd like to, and just say, can I come to this interaction? Maybe I came in with an idea, but based on the response I get, am I willing to adjust and not have any judgment on myself or the horse if things don't go the way that I was hoping that they would go? And Mary, if you don't have a horse, or maybe you do, I don't know if you're going out to the sanctuary yet,
No,
but you have dogs and cats there, and I know they're a little different than horses, but this same dynamic you could practice with any animal. So you can do it with a horse too, if you want. I mean, with a dog or a cat too.
hmm
Cats will say no.
yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
All right. Well, we still got like 10 minutes before we have to end. Is there anything just that, any questions you have, anything you want to share? General reflections? Yeah, Carol?
I know I wrote a comment, I guess it was on the clean relationships when, with my horse, like specifically yesterday, the day before, I stood with her and said, okay, let's go. And she went with me, and I thought, oh, I just gave that extra second to have her decide to walk with me, and she did. But then yesterday she was back to, I don't want to go. And yeah, I know most trainers or whatever would say, well, you have to make, I don't know, make her go, or at least motivate her to go, either by, flinging the lead
Yeah.
around or whatever. And that wasn't working. And I thought, okay, so what is this situation? I did try a few different things, but ultimately when I was listening or reading about clean relations, I thought, well, what would have been the thing to do? Take the halter off and say, okay, we don't have to do anything today, or to keep asking. And there you go, asking. So I'm asking the horse, thinking, oh my, she doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to do this. And
Well,
do I walk away? And then she gets like a victory out of it. Not that that's the old
so yeah,
thinking, I know, but it's there.
that's human thinking to have the victory. But another way to think about it might be to, ask her, what does she want to do? Like, not just thinking of taking off the halter as like, I'm going to take off the halter and you win, but take off the halter to say, all right, if I'm not influencing you, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What's like, I don't know. It's more just getting curious about what might be going on for her, right? It's a no. It doesn't necessarily mean like it's about you or it's this battle of winning, but it's like really wanting to understand what makes her tick. So clean relations with a person or another animal is that I care who you are, right? I want you to care who I am too, but horse dynamics are a little harder because a lot of them have never really been asked who they are or how do they feel or anything. So this dynamic could be about much more than you and her. It could be about her whole history, right? With humans.
It's longer than I thought. Yes.
Yes, if she's 25, there's been a lot of history there, right? So I would say like just drop the agenda for now, right? Because agendas aren't necessarily clean. Agendas are unclean. And just go into more of a like, who are you? I'm curious about who you are, and let go of all this human stuff that's about, oh, we're supposed to be able to control our horses and like what other people might say about what you're doing. You're letting her win. You're letting her do what, right?
Yeah.
The question is, what would be clean relations? I think it would be starting from that, like we're pretty new to each other, and I really would like to know who you are. And she may not even know, because talking about trauma responses, most horses aren't really ever given the freedom to ask who a human is, right? So it might be a lot to think she's going to be asking you questions at this point, because she may not have she may have had 25 years of history that tell her she's not supposed to ask any questions. She's just supposed to do what she's told. And her stopping, I think, is maybe one, her saying, I'm done with that. right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other is I also find I've used to do a lot of behavior consultations with difficult horses. And what I would find, and often the owner, who was the person who loved the horses the most and wanted to listen to the horse, but was trying to do what other people said they should do, that the horse would do the thing. Like somebody else would say, see, I'll grab her. I can walk her. Why can't you walk her? Right?
Yeah.
I can get her to do this. Why can't you get her to do
Bring
this?
your energy forward. Yes. And it's like,
Where that horse can feel the energy of like, well, this person doesn't care at all how I feel. This person just wants, I know what this is. I just, we know it's not worth having this conversation with this person. I better just do what I'm being told. But
Yeah.
with the owner, a lot of times the horse
Huh.
senses that this person does care how I feel. So I'm going to speak to this person where I'm not speaking to the people who aren't going to listen anyway. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
So don't beat yourself up if the horse walks and leads fine for someone else, but not you. That may not be what it seems. That may be that the horse does sense that you do care about how she's feeling, right? And you don't want to just force her to
Right.
do it,
Right.
right? Yeah. So get curious about who she is. And I don't, how do you ask that? I would say anything she offers, anything she's willing to offer on her own accord, be grateful for it. Go, oh, huh, okay, you wanted to go over there? Oh, the hay. Maybe it's just the hay. Maybe, where, just be curious. Where would she go if you took off the halter? Would she still just stand there? Or would
Then
she
she
want
go up and graze.
to go and graze?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's funny thing because it's like, well, if she's in a sort of a dry lot because she does have Cushing's.
Oh, yeah. She'll want to graze.
And yeah, and so if I take her out, she'll of course go right for the grass, and I let her, like 5 minutes. I'll give her, um, and I'm saying to her, but don't you want to go out there where all the good grass is? And she's like,
But like, here,
anyway, yeah,
uh, just real quick, like the whole grazing is so ingrained in them, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
everything about. They're supposed to do it for 18 hours a day. It's how they calm their nervous systems. So
Yeah.
she just may be going to whatever the closest blade of grass is, and her
Mhm.
nervous system may just be saying, it might not just be about food. It might be about, I just really need to do this behavior, right?
Hmm.
So just try to have a little empathy for that. She may be coming into things dysregulated because she is on a dry lot, and that may be what you have to do for her health, but it does have consequences that, she's not able to, perform the behaviors that are self-care for her, right? And so then when you ask even one more thing, follow
Yeah.
me, she's already, may already be at like, this is all, I'm doing all I can just to keep it together here, right?
Okay.
So just be, go into empathy mode, curiosity mode.
Yeah, I did know that when I took a few steps back and started doing what I've learned in natural lifemanship, which was getting the horse to if they resist, you persist. If they stop and face you, you back up, and if they ignore you, then you kind of throw some energy at their butt or whatever to get them to move, and then eventually they realize this isn't getting me anywhere, and they turn towards you, and then you back up. And I was able to do that with her in a round pen. And so I kind of, all right, we're out in the paddock. We know each other a little better. Let me see if I can do it. And I did get her to come to me that way, sort of. So maybe that's what I need to stick with for a while. It's just,
Yeah.
uh,
And there's different things, right? So there's,
choose it. Yeah. That it
that's
gives life gives them choice too. They can walk away, but then you follow. And that in my little persistence thing with Rayleigh is probably what causes me to go, oh, this doesn't feel right to follow her. Anyway,
So here, let me say one other thing for you. Because the relationship, and you guys don't have anything you have to accomplish, right? You're just in relationship with each other. You're knowing you're dealing with yourself and your patterns, and she obviously comes with a lot of stuff too, right? So yes, systems are wonderful. And I know I love a lot about the natural life program, right? And any kind of training program, but also you don't have to do it that way, right? The relationship you have with her is yours to explore. And if being persistent is triggering for you because of your trauma, right? There can be times when you say, I want to work on that in myself. I want to try. Maybe I'm going to ask 3 times and see how I feel about that, right? But you're also allowed to not go there with yourself, right? And you can say, I don't want to be in a relationship where I constantly have to ask you 4 or 5 times. That's not the relationship I want to be in. And so, but that may mean she's going to graze. And so can you go over and stand with her while she grazes and
Yep.
groom her or
Awesome.
touch her,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely.
Just giving yourself more flexibility, right? There's nothing in particular that you have to accomplish. So
Mhm.
in terms of this course, this is just about exploring the relationship dynamics, and you should be able to be true to yourself too. That's different than saying, I'm never going to work on myself or my patterns, but you don't have to be using that time for that. If you want it to just be enjoyable time for both of you, that's okay too.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, we're at 1:30, so thank you all, and kudos on the good work this week. Special another kudo to Colleen because she tackled a big one right off the bat here. And I'll see you guys in the classroom. And again, use the Facebook page if you want to share anything or if you have any questions. All right. Y'all are doing great. This is hard stuff.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye-bye.
Ah.